Alrighty. So here we are with our continuing look at WrestleMania, and Harry and Patrick on episode 8 of Wrestling Unwrapped will take you through WrestleMania 1 and all the things that went into that. But before we begin, we gotta play some Easy Liver. Oh, I could listen to that all day. But guys, take it away.
Am I like the only one that before I watched this show on the network had never heard that song?
You've never heard that song?
You've never heard of Easy Lover? I'm not a Phil Collins fan. No, I'm more of a... I like the non-point version of In the Air Tonight more than I like the Collins one.
If Gary was here, he would be, but I want to fit right now. He is like a huge Phil Collins guy.
You know, if Gary were here, he'd also be making really bad jokes, and that's kind of our job on this show. Ladies and gentlemen, it is March 6th, I think? 6th. Hey, I got one. All right. It is March 6th, 2016. You are listening to Wrestling Unwrapped. My name is Harry Broadhurst. I am your host this evening. And no, don't be weirded out. I'm used to doing this kind of stuff. You could say I'm a bit of an expert. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. Quiet, you. And you are listening to Wrestling Unwrapped. My co-host is Patrick Ketza.
Oh, please. Everyone wants to listen to me. We all know this.
Yeah, we'll see about that when the ratings come in for this episode. Anywho. Sorry about that. It's, like I said, I feel the need to preface this episode by saying that I have not felt good all day. I'm doing this show here because we promised that we would do it, and honestly, my schedule doesn't line up for us to do it any other day this week. I'm going to try my best to stay with you guys here, but in order to make things a little bit easier on myself here, Patrick's going to take over a couple of responsibilities that I would normally handle, and then I'm going to take over a couple of responsibilities Patrick would normally handle. Anywho, so I got to be honest with you, Patrick, this was a weird one for me. And why is that? Because this is the very first show that we've ever done here on Wrestling Unwrapped that I do not own a physical copy of.
Which I find weird.
You would think of all the shows for me not to have, WrestleMania 1 wouldn't be one of them.
Yes, Mr. 2500 TV fan.
27. But thanks for playing.
Price is right, I still win.
The thing about it is the earliest WrestleMania I own is actually WrestleMania 3.
Do you have the championship edition?
The 2-disc one that came out a couple years ago?
Yep.
Yes, I do.
Ah.
I'm actually a little surprised we didn't do WrestleMania 3 for this whole thing. I mean, given the choice here, it's obviously the far more important WrestleMania compared to this one, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the show.
Yeah.
How was it that you described this WrestleMania on the Facebook page?
Oh, I'm sure we're going to end up going through that quite a bit today. This glorified house show.
Yeah, you actually upset a couple of people with that statement.
You being one of them.
One of our sponsors being another.
Oh, boy.
Way to go. Speaking of which, Wrestling Unwrapped is brought to you by the Wrestling the W2M network, which also hosts such great shows as Wrestling to the Max, Football to the Max, Video Games to the Max. Is it Video Games to the Max, Sean? The formerly four-player co-op. And in addition, we are also brought to you in association with LastWordOnSports.com as well as 411mania.com /wrestling. Because, that's the side of the site we're on. So how's your week been, Patrick?
Kind of boring, mostly working and barely being able to actually get this show in. Not even going to lie, but that's normal for me. How about you, Harry? Health issues aside, of course.
I've been worse. I've been better, but I've been worse. Truth be told, as far as this thing goes, migraines kind of run in the family. And I get them on occasion, usually during the afternoon, and then I'll take something in the fade, or I'll hop in the shower, and it'll help them fade away. I tried that today, no such luck, so I'm going to kind of suffer through this one while we're doing the show. How about yourself, Sean? How was your week?
Just the kid's been sick this weekend, so kind of just taking care of her and trying to catch up on some New Japan.
I do remember you telling me by text when we were talking earlier in the week that Anaya wasn't feeling well. Hopefully she's feeling better soon.
Oh, she's doing okay today. Seems more herself.
No, that's good. So I have a question for you, Patrick.
Oh, boy.
Do you have the results ready?
Unlike you, usually, yes, I do.
Hey, I will have you know that it takes me a few moments to find the results because I have written down versions of them inside of notebooks that I collect. I do not go off of Wikipedia in order to get my results and my match times. I time them out myself.
Well, in this case, because I'm doing it and not you, we're going off of Wikipedia.
Let's go with, let's give Harry a cookie for doing all that.
He had some earlier. Already.
I did. Girl Scout cookies, dude. It's that time of the year. Oh, fantastic.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
don't get me wrong. $4 a box is starting to get a little ridiculous for 15 cookies, but so good.
Considering where I work, we had purchased 50 cases of Fitmints because we sell Fitmints mixed in with our custard. So I'm sick of them.
Well, you leave your Girl Scout eating behind at home. And now, with your WrestleMania 1 results, here is Patrick Ketza.
Thank you, Harry. Yeah, a little different this week, so I'm running through it. WrestleMania, March the 31st, 1985, from the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. 9 matches on the card. The first one, Tito Santana defeats the Executioner. We'll talk about who's that last. He has a figure 4 leg lock at 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Match number 2 is King Kong Bundy defeating SD Special Delivery Jones in 9.24 seconds. Match number 3 is 24. We'll talk about that. Match number 3, Ricky Steamboat defeats the Maniac Matt Bourne via a special. You're foreshadowing everything we're going to end up talking about tonight.
I am not saying anything directly, though, so therefore I'm having fun with it. Carry on.
True, very true. And he does that in 4 minutes, 38 seconds.
Okay, before you go into the next match, I feel the need to point out something right here.
Okay.
Okay, let's think about the timings for those first 3 matches here. 4:55, 9.24, and 4:46. Now, consider the 2 participants in this match and listen to the match time very closely. Go ahead, Patrick.
This David Sammartino and not yet Barber Brutus cake end up in a draw that I think was thrown out as a double disqualification at 11:44. The match is thrown out at 11:44.
It is the only match besides the main event to break the 10-minute mark on this show. Trust me, I'm going to have something to say about that.
That's okay. The timing for the next 4 matches are actually very closely grouped as well. In the match for the Intercontinental Championship, the Junkyard Dog defeats Greg the Hammer Valentine via countdowns after a referee restarts the match due to Tito Santana getting involved. I'll explain. At 6 minutes, 55 seconds. I think that's 6:55 to the second bell.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I wasn't long. Then for the WWF Tag Team Champions, Nikolai, Volkoff, and the Iron Sheik defeat the U.S. Express of Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo to become the new Tag Team Champions at 6:50.
Question.
What?
Rotundo or Rotunda?
He's referred to as Rotundo here, but I think it's Rotunda.
I was going to say, I'm almost certain it's Mike Rotunda.
Yeah.
Yes, it is Rotunda.
Yeah, but his nameplate and everything, they kept calling him Rotundo on this match.
Yeah,
Rotundo, Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti, Rotundo.
They screwed up on that.
Volkoff and Sheik become the WWF Tag Team Champions after Sheik hits Barry Windham with Freddie Blassie for this pain. Then in a $15,000 versus career body slam match, Andre the Giant defeats Big John Studd at 5:54 when he body slams him. That's it. Then in the sub-main event for the Ladies' Championship, Wendy Richter, accompanied by Cyndi Lauper, defeats Leilani Kai to become the new Ladies' Champion at 6:12. And in our main event, with every special guest, there's 9 matches. What do you want?
No, I'm just saying the snoring guy over here, he's...
Anyway.
When we discuss that women's match, you'll understand.
Oh, okay. I think I know what you mean.
I thought you were making a joke at Patrick.
So did I.
No, that was specifically about that women's match.
Okay. I should say, Wendy Richter defeats Leilani Kai to become the new Ladies Champion at 6 minutes and 12 seconds after a botched reversal into a pin. It's kind of hard to explain. And then in the main event, with every special guest galore, the incredible World Wrestling Federation champion Hulk Hogan and defeat Roddy Piper and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff after a botched interference by Cowboy Bob Orton at 13:24. Wait a minute.
I think I figured out the deal with Orton's cast. He was so humiliated by the fact that he blew the finish for WrestleMania 1 that he just decided to wear it for the rest of his career to remind himself what an idiot he was.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
It's the closest thing to a legitimate reason I can think of. What are we calling the halfway point for the show? Because we have a very interesting discussion for the show tonight as well.
The Intercontinental Championship match, probably.
All right, that works too. Sean, are you going to get in on this discussion? Because it's a doozy.
What is it?
Our discussion tonight will be what happens if WrestleMania 1 fails at the box office.
Ah, okay, yeah.
All right. Thank you for the results, Patrick.
You're welcome, Harry.
And I assure you that my snoring was in no way indicative of your result rating. It had everything to do with the snore fest that was that women's title match. Give me the Spider Lady any day over that garbage. Good grief.
I would prefer anybody but the Spider Lady, quite frankly.
I will say this much. There was one cool move in that match, and we'll talk about it there. I think I figured out where John Cena got the FU from.
Okay. I know exactly the move you're talking about.
Not gonna lie, I popped for that. And like somewhere, a young John Cena is watching this thinking, son of a bitch.
I love that move. Except I'm going to do it from the head, not the legs.
All right, so enough foreshadowing. Let's actually get to discussing the card itself here. Why don't we go ahead and get into the first half of the show? Your opening contest just kind of blows away.
So this match sure blows, but...
Well, it blew away. Nudge, 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 wink, wink. No. Too subtle?
I think I got it. I don't know if the listeners get it if they don't know who's under the mask.
Well, that's kind of the point of trying to warn them about who's under the mask. Yes, the very first match in WrestleMania history is indeed the not quite yet El Matador, Tito Santana, kicking out the Executioner in 4 minutes and 47 seconds. The Executioner that I refer to when I say he just kind of blew away would have been none other than a very svelte-looking Playboy Buddy Rose.
Indeed. So, that's something that he actually gets to take with, he would be able to take with him. He was in the very first WrestleMania match. As far as the match goes, what do you expect? It was a squash. It was a squash because Tito at this time is fighting with Greg the Hammer Valentine over the Intercontinental Championship. Cough, cough. And would in fact win the Intercontinental Championship back 3 months, just a little bit less than 3 months to the day, in June of 1985, before dropping it to Randy Savage, who would then hold it for the next 14 months.
Right. Defending against George the Animal Steel at WrestleMania 2 before finally dropping it at WrestleMania 3 in a match. And if you don't know about, frankly, you're probably not that big of a wrestling historian.
She's too young for you, bro. Anyway, in terms of this match, like I said, it was essentially a squash. And pretty much the entire point of the match was the ending of it, which had Tito Santana, rather than winning via the flying forearm, the flying burrito, he wins it. He wins it via the figure four leg lock, which was at the time Greg Valentine's signature move. So, for the most part, that was pretty much the entire point of this match, because the Executioner barely really got any offense in, and, it was just meant to be a showcase for Tito Santana.
This was back when Wyndham was using the figure, or not Wyndham, wow, excuse me. This was back when Valentine was using the figure four before Ronnie Garvin came up with the greatest counter ever to it in the Hammer Jammer.
I can't believe that was a thing.
Again, a reference that most of our listeners are probably not going to get. If you've never seen their match at Royal Rumble in 1991, I believe it is, it's actually really good.
Except for the fact that they can't remember the rules.
Yeah, well, referees are idiots. That's just under general principle.
Except it wasn't the referee that was forgetting the rules. It wasn't the referee forgetting the rules.
That being said, as far as this match goes here, Patrick's right. It is pretty much an extended squash, because this would have been the kind of match that you would have traditionally seen on television, just a little bit shorter. That being said, Tito Santana does get the dubious distinction of being the first ever victor in WrestleMania history. And if I am not mistaken, I do believe this is his only win in WrestleMania history.
Roddy. I'm sitting here trying to think, and yeah, I can't really remember him. I don't think he ever did get the WrestleMania win.
I don't recall any other victories. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Buddy Rose would go on to... I think Buddy Rose wouldn't last much longer in the WWF, if I'm not mistaken. He would end up going back to the AWA as part of the team with Doug Somers, and I'm drawing a blank on their name.
I don't know that they ever had a name. I just know them as Pretty Boy Doug Somers and Playboy Booty Roots.
Best known for their feud with the Midnight Rockers of Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, and if you own any of Shawn Michaels' DVD sets, I myself happen to own all of them except for one. I don't own Boyhood Dream. You'll find a multitude of Rockers versus Rose and Somers matches on there. Rose at that point was actually a pretty decent worker. This was before he blew up, and I mean that in the literal sense, in the fact that at WrestleMania 1 here, I would say he was probably 250, 260.
Yeah.
At the end of his career, when he was doing the blow-away gimmick, and that's the reference that I was making, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then by all means, please, for the love of God, YouTube. Rose was probably significantly over the 300-pound mark. I'm saying almost 330.
Oh, I was going to say probably close to 100 pounds heavier.
Right, so that's where the blow-away reference comes from, because he was trying to do it as the Bloody Rose diet. It was known as the blow-away diet, and that's the reference that I was making earlier. But having talked about this match for almost as long as it ran, we're going to give the next match as long as it runs as well, and we're done here, allegedly.
Pretty much. Okay. King Kong Bundy and SD Jones. Okay, we'll go ahead and mention it, at least. And we're going to end up talking about it for longer than the actual match time.
And way longer than the announced match time, because I'm sorry, WWF, you must think that people out there are complete morons if you expect them to buy that 9-second number.
Yeah.
Well, people back then were probably bigger morons than they are now. So
I actually did time this match out with Mississippi's as I watched it, and I got 21. So anywhere in that general area of the shortest match of 23 seconds is probably a viable contender at this point. That being said, this is not even the shortest match in WrestleMania history, thanks to Sheamus and Daniel Bryan anymore.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a very fast win. I think I usually have it timed out to like 23, 24 seconds. And, yeah, it's cool, you know, okay, history has been made here at WrestleMania, blah, 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 and woo, woo, woo. But to me, that's just a slap in the face. To call it 9 seconds when it's blatantly like 20 seconds. Even if it went to 21 seconds, Gorilla Monsoon on commentary mentions the previous shorter match being 23. So 21 seconds still is the record.
And I want to talk about the fact that we're getting promos from everybody before the matches happen. And watching an SD Jones promo kind of explains to me why his match went 20 seconds.
Why, you don't like that he sit down with the biggest thing in town?
I wanted to change the channel.
Oh, okay.
I've always been a fan of King Kong Bundy. And the reason I say that is because I'm a fan of bigger guys that can move. And at that point, Bundy was actually pretty agile. I've always liked the 747 splash, which was the running splash that he did for his finish after the corner avalanche. I'm a little disappointed there was no 5 count, though.
Yeah, especially because they hyped that up in his promo before the match, but there was no 5 count here.
And I'm sure that they could have lived with the extra 2 seconds for the finish there if they're going to claim 9.
Yeah. Anyway, we've gone on far too long already about this.
I think we can safely say the first dud in WrestleMania history.
I have it rated higher than some.
Do I want to know? Do I?
Only
really?
because, while, yeah, they blatantly slap you in the face about the time, it still does a hell of a lot to get Bundy over.
And the thing about it is,
well, here, let me finish real quick. He would main event the next WrestleMania, so this was, a continuing thing.
well, that's actually funny that you mentioned, because that's kind of what I was going to say. Do you know the reason that Bundy was in the WWF? I had the opportunity to read, I don't know how familiar you are, but I'm sure Sean would be familiar with his work. Sean, does the name J.D. Dunn ring a bell to you?
J.D. Dunn as in 401's J.D. Dunn?
Yes, sir. I had the opportunity to read his WrestleMania 1 review while I was doing my prep work for this show, and I want to say that there are very few reviewers who I trust on a fairly consistent basis to not lead me wrong as far as information goes. J.D. Dunn is one of those guys. He has long been a favorite of mine as far as reviews go. And he actually mentions the fact that the reason that King Kong Bundy was in the WWF in the first place is because Hogan brought him in when they had a chance meeting in Minnesota while Bundy was working for New Japan Pro Wrestling at the time. And then that led to the squash match at WrestleMania 1, in addition to building up Bundy as a big thing going towards their cage match that they would have at WrestleMania 2.
Right. Hogan also a participant in New Japan Pro Wrestling, so no, they would know each other from many places.
There was a chance meeting, according to JD, there was a chance meeting in Minnesota that Hogan had with Bundy, that he saw something in Bundy and wanted to bring him in, kind of similar to what happened with Hogan and Big Show. And I bring that up because I just watched the Big Show DVD as well, and they talked about how Jimmy Hart brought Big Show in as a ringer for a charity basketball game, because Big Show played basketball in college, and those of you who don't know, he was a Wichita State Shocker. Screw them, by the way, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. But he brought Big Show in as a ringer for a charity basketball game, and apparently as soon as Hogan saw Big Show at that basketball game, he had dollar signs in his eyes for what kind of business he could do with him involved with the Dungeon of Doom. I feel like we need to hit up Halloween Havoc 1995 for when we finish with the WWF stuff.
If nothing else, for the Monster Truck Sumo match.
Oh, God.
Actually on the Big Show DVD.
Because, of course.
No, because WCW. All right, match 3.
Thank God we can move away from this. Ricky Steamboat taking on the maniac Matt Bourne, son of Tough Tony Bourne.
Would you like to explain that reference?
Don't make me doink you on the nose, okay?
Oh, that was corny.
Well, it makes sense. Since, Doink was also a clown, and clowns are corny. But,
I will say this much, Bourne was... I will say this much, Bourne was not clowning around during the course of this match.
No.
All right, obviously we're making reference to the fact that Matt Bourne was the original Doink the Clown back in the early 90s.
And you could also make a point that his clown was much different than the other clowns that would come later. Very dark clown.
His clown was evil.
Yeah, which made it awesome.
Were you a fan of Evil Doink, Sean?
Yes. It's just, the other Doinks, I got it, what they were trying to do, but Matt Bourne was the best.
You would argue that Bourne is arguably the most famous Doink. The only other name that you would really consider for that argument would probably be Steve Lombardi.
Yeah.
Because I know there were a couple other people who played Doink, but none of them had any kind of extended run as the character, whereas Bourne was the original, and then babyface Doink is most synonymous with Steve Lombardi.
No. I thought that would be Ray Apollo, who would be the face Doink.
I prefer Steve Lombardi.
I thought it was Ray Apollo.
But anyways, enough about the background or enough about the future of the guy. Let's talk about the present of 1985 for Matt Bourne here. And Matt Bourne came into this match known as the Maniac Matt Bourne. And the problem was, in the promo that he had, he threatened to beat up Ricky Steamboat because Ricky Steamboat just wasn't mean enough. And then he proceeded to anger Ricky Steamboat during the course of the match. The number one rule of ninja-in is you don't go ninja-in anybody who don't need ninja. At that point, Bourne made himself in need of being ninja'd, and Ricky Steamboat was more than happy to oblige.
Wait a minute, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I think you've filled the quota for ninja mentions.
Well, there are no more ninjas on the show, so I kind of had to get them in where I could.
10.
It's like Fight Club. The first rule of ninjas: you don't talk about ninjas.
By the way, how dare you say there are no more ninjas on this show? You know damn well Iron Sheik's coming up.
Sure, let's go with that. Okay.
Just because.
I'm going to give something away here, and I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say this, but I'm going to give something away here. This is my match of the night between Steamboat and Bourne, and the reason being...
I completely agree with you, Harry.
And the reason being that these two right here actually went out there, they told a story, and the cool thing about Ricky Steamboat is Ricky was just so easily over as a babyface that he didn't need to do a ton to connect with the crowd, and the fact that he was able to deliver in the ring as he was just an added bonus. Ricky Steamboat has long been a favorite of mine. He's easily my favorite babyface of this era. If you ask me, my favorite wrestlers from this era were all three heels, or all three most commonly known as heels, and that would be Jake the Snake Roberts, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, and the Macho Man Randy Savage. But as far as babyfaces coming out of the 80s and stuff there, I don't think you could set the bar any higher than Ricky Steamboat.
The man never was a heel. That's the best part about it, is Ricky Steamboat never played a heel.
Ricky Steamboat physically could not play a heel.
And think about this, in our wall TNA moment, TNA tried, and it failed, because I think in the end he ended up not making any more appearances after, but TNA tried to turn Ricky freaking Steamboat heel.
Oh, you're referring to the early weekly pay-per-views and his feud with R-Truth.
No.
Yeah, TNA.
TNA mention on this show.
Oh, I'm still trying to convince Patrick to get more TNA DVDs so we can just have fun burying the company at will, because frankly, it's long overdue that we do so on this show.
We still have standards here.
No, we don't. Who are you kidding?
Maybe you can do that AJ Styles collection or whatever when it comes out.
No, I don't want to do a 4-disc set.
You do know what was funny though? I was watching one of the pay-per-views with one of my friends, and the very first thought that we had when that set came out is we're like waiting for TNA Dixie to tag herself during Raw one week and try to scroll about that AJ DVD coming out soon to find out all the best of the phenomenal matches before he went to the WWE. Her to try to sneak it onto the scroll during an episode of Raw. I'm fully expecting it to happen.
You know what? I wouldn't put it past her to try. But okay, enough TNA talk. As far as this match goes, I mean, yeah, they were able to tell a story. In all likelihood, let's face it, this is the best match on the card. But like we said, look who's in it. Matt Bourne was definitely. I mean, no, he was the world's greatest, but he was a quality enough wrestler. We have Ricky Steamboat, who, by the late '80s was probably one of the best in the world at wrestling. So there should be no doubt that, even though they have less than 5 freaking minutes, which is far, far too short here. Well, here, let me finish real quick. It should come as no surprise that this is actually a good match.
Oh, believe me, we're going to talk about the match, the fact that this match went 5 minutes and how long the next match went.
Shall we get to it?
Do we have to?
Yes.
Brutus Beefcake and David San Martino go to a double disqualification. The end. I'm done. Go ahead, Patrick.
Well, let's make a mention because I didn't earlier if he was seconding both of them. At least David.
All right. I don't know about you, but I'm actually not that familiar with Luscious Johnny Valiant. I know I'm much more familiar with his brother, Jimmy.
Boogie Woogie Man.
Yes, correct. David San Martino's second would be none other than his father, Bruno, and this would be, to my knowledge, until he came back to do the Hall of Fame and his appearance with Triple H. This would be, in fact, the only WrestleMania that Bruno San Martino would appear on until he came back.
No, he was in the Battle Royal 1 year later.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, well, I suppose I sit corrected then.
Sorry.
It's okay. I don't mind being wrong. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It happens. Admit our mistakes and move on.
WrestleMania 2 would be one of his final appearances.
But here's my thing about it, though. Then if you're going to have Bruno on the show, then why are you giving 11 minutes to his son? Why not let Bruno come out there? Turn it into a tag match and let Bruno pin Valiant. Who's that going to hurt?
Because the point was they were trying to put over his son.
But his son was hot garbage. His son made Eric Watts look competent. Oh.
I didn't think his son was hot. His son was, I think, he hadn't been wrestling very long when he was doing this, and he was definitely a good technical guy. He didn't have any kind of charisma or anything. He's just a guy.
Which therein takes me back to my big point about this match. If he has no charisma, if he's an okay technical worker, but he has no charisma and no ability to connect with the fans, then why are you giving him almost 12 minutes in the first place?
Because again, we know how Vince is about his, second generation, all that kind of stuff. I mean, dude, he owes Bruno like a freaking lifetime of things. At this point, this is, Hogan is doing stuff with Hulkamania, but it becomes much bigger later. Bruno is still the reason why he has the WWF.
And not only that, to be fair, David didn't get much of a reaction, but Bruno got a very large one, with this crowd too. So he's still over. So they're going to do whatever they can to get Bruno in there. And if that means, shoehorning David in there in order to get Bruno on the show, they'll do it.
Right.
All right, but that goes back to my point of if you feel the desire, I should say, to put Bruno on this show, then make it a tag match and let Bruno get the pin on Valiant. Do not put David and Brutus out there by themselves to die, and especially not for as long as they did.
12 minutes is way too long here. You could have cut this. You essentially could have flipped the times on this match and the previous match, and I don't think anybody would complain. Especially to have a 12-minute match, the second longest match on your show, and it ends in a double DQ. Just
Again, I think we have to remember that until that Macho Man and Ricky Steamboat match, a lot of these WrestleManias are made to build to the main event. I mean, let's be honest here.
Which is all the more reason not to give this undercard match between two jamucks 12 minutes. Because, okay, David San Martino is Bruno's son. I get that. I do. But he had done nothing to this point to justify getting 12 minutes. And Brutus Beefcake at this point meant nothing in the world of professional wrestling other than the fact that he was Hulk Hogan's friend Ed Leslie.
Okay, you can keep belaboring this point all you want to. The point is, Vince probably did it to Bruno as a favor, and he said, let my son have some time to show what he can do, and you also get the benefit of Bruno being out there to probably, pop a crowd, pop some people buying some tickets in the arena and all that stuff. I mean, just you got to look at it from Vince's perspective. And it's not like David goes away after this. He shows up on other WrestleManias. So it's not like
David?
Yes, he shows up on other WrestleManias.
Pretty sure he's in the Battle Royals at 2 and 4.
I think he also has a match on another.
I don't think so.
Hold
on. I have an almanac here. I can check for that. All right, let's talk about
here real quick. I mean, to Sean's point, yeah, you do get the advantage, but it's just the fact that this is longer than every title match. This match is longer than every title match. You know, I don't think it's the fact of, you know, having this match on this card. That's fine. It's the length that's the issue here.
Yes, I have absolutely no reason with throwing David a bone and giving him a match at this show. But if you're going to give guys like Ricky Steamboat and Tito Santana only 4 minutes, and as we find out a little bit later on in the show, Andre the Giant and Big John Studd 6 minutes, there's no reason this should have gotten almost 12. That's all I'm saying.
Well, apparently Bruno did come out of retirement after this match and tagged with his son for a while. But Bruno
to try and get David over.
Yes, but Bruno calls it the least favorite time of his career, probably also because we got to remember Bruno is one of those guys that felt like if he wasn't doing it at his best, he didn't really want to be doing it. So, you know, he probably felt like that it was kind of it wasn't helping his it was helping his son, but it wasn't him at his best, and he probably didn't want to be seen that way.
Which is him looking at the fact that he was teaming with his son is kind of tarnishing his own legacy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
David was also fired after his second run in WWF after he punched a fan.
To be fair, that is the only heat David drew in his entire career on his own. So good for him. Anywho.
And there's a lot of people that think apparently that it was a plant so that Vince could fire him.
Because why not? No, wrestling isn't backwards at all. Why do you ask?
Well, because Vince knew he was not progressing at all and bad. He amazingly won. Hey, you know, your beautiful PWI that you love so much, he won Rookie of the Year in 1981.
PWI has never been known for its, you know, integrity.
Well, you know, Harry likes to collect the magazines.
Let me put this into perspective for you, Sean. Eric Watts also won Rookie of the Year. Take it for what it's worth. Sorry.
Why is that publication even around?
I'm just saying. All right.
People need to laugh occasionally.
I mean, I don't disagree with this year's Rookie of the Year winner, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and get into the tag title match?
No, Intercontinental.
Oh, excuse me. Why don't we go ahead and get into the Intercontinental title match? I knew it was one of them.
Yeah, our first of 3 title matches. Grab Them Cakes, which, by the way...
Yeah, what the hell? Do they not own that song?
Wait, what version did you watch, Harry?
I watched it on the network, and Grab Them Cakes was not on it.
Yes, it is. I watched the network version.
I did not hear Grab Them Cakes.
I don't know how. You must have been muted, but I clearly heard it.
Now I'm going to have to go back and recheck that out and see if it is there.
Well, it doesn't even matter because it more drives me nuts about the fact that watching it on the network makes me wish I still had the VHS anthology that came out after WrestleMania 14 or 15, one of them.
Yeah, I had that one.
I used to have that one. Because that one has WrestleMania on VHS, uncut, because Grab Them Cakes was not a thing in 1985. And he did have music, but JYD, the match itself is the JYD Junkyard Dog going up against the Intercontinental Champion Greg the Hammer Valentine. JYD comes out to Another One Bites the Dust. Do. Another One Bites the Dust. Do. But actually, I think every song on the network version is dubbed over. Yeah. Because U.S. Express came out to Born in the USA, Wendy Richter came out to Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and Hogan and Mr. G don't come out to Real American, they come out to Eye of the Tiger. But every single one of them is dubbed over, which drives me nuts, but that's neither here nor there, because they'd have to pay everybody.
Shenanigans.
So, I mean, once again, the match itself is secondary to the point of the match. The point of the match was to continue Greg Valentine versus Tito Santana, because in this match, which was actually, really getting going, and I always laugh anytime Gorilla Monsoon mentions Greg Valentine's gas tank, and the fact that it takes him a few minutes to really get going, and he mentions that almost every time. But this match really did start to get going, and then, you get the wipeout of Jimmy Hart by Greg Valentine, and then you get, a roll-up with the ropes assisted, and Greg Valentine ends up winning, quote-unquote wins.
I have officially dubbed that move the Flair Corner Cradle.
Okay.
Because NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair was notorious for that pinfall.
Oh, yeah.
The double leg with the ropes in the corner.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It essentially was how convenient that Greg Valentine uses Ric Flair's pinfall maneuver and Ric Flair's submission.
I'm just saying, Hammer, come up with your own stuff.
He came up with the Heartbreaker.
Who's a what now?
You mentioned the Hammer Jammer.
Ah, yes.
Greg Valentine's version was the Heartbreaker.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah. And then Tito ends up coming out and pitches a hissy fit for whatever reason, and somehow convinces the referee to restart the match, and Junkyard Dog ends up winning immediately via count out, and Greg Valentine never gets back in. So JYD wins, but Greg Valentine keeps the belt in officially 6:55.
Question, Patrick.
I'm not sure I want to answer.
Do you own the Legends of WrestleMania game?
The Legends of WrestleMania game?
Yes.
I do not.
Well, it's an actual WWE produced game.
I know about it. I don't know it, but I know of it.
Well, the reason I ask is because in the replay, relive, recreate, or reimagine thing about it, the very first thing that you do in relive is you're supposed to help Junkyard Dog actually cleanly beat Greg the Hammer Valentine to win the Intercontinental title.
Interesting.
I just thought that was a cute little side note for everybody here. Yeah, here's the thing. As much as I like Junkyard Dog, and I've always thought that Sylvester Ritter was underrated as a worker. As you mentioned while you were talking about the way that this match went down here, this was clearly just here as a backdrop towards the developing Tito Santana, Greg Valentine feud that we covered earlier on in the show. So let's go ahead and just give credit to both participants involved, because it was actually a pretty spirited contest. I mean, it definitely picked up towards the tail end there, and obviously they had the crowd rocking and reeling, because I would argue at this point, behind Hogan and Andre, Junkyard Dog was probably the third most popular member of the WWF roster.
There's very little doubt there.
I mean, definitely more so than somebody like Randy Richter would have been, and certainly had more of a following than David San Martino.
I think I have more of a following than David San Martino. let's not get crazy here.
I think David Sammartino is one of those guys that's just lost in history that no one would remember if we didn't have to rewatch WrestleMania 1 all the time.
And every time you go to rewatch, you're like, wow, he sucks. Sammartino bites the dust.
I agree with you on the, I've always loved Junkyard Dog, and I always never thought why people didn't talk about him enough as actually a wrestler. I know he was so charismatic and just, everything about him, he was so over with the crowds and everything, but people don't talk enough about his work, and I think I agree with you, Harry, it's really underrated.
Well, the thing about it is in order to actually see Junkyard at his best, you kind of have to get into the territory days back in the days of like Mid-South and stuff, because when he was dealing with the known racist Bill Watts as his boss, he was going out there and busting his ass to let everybody know that regardless of what Watts may think about me as a person, as a worker, he can't deny my talents. And as soon as he got the comfortable job with the WWF, I think a lot of his drive to put on those show-stealing matches every night went away. But at the same time, his charisma more than carried him through.
Yeah, there's almost no doubt there because, like you said, I think, to at least on this show, JYD probably gets the third best reaction out of anybody. Bruno being number 2 and Hogan obviously being number 1. So yeah, his charisma is almost boundless and endless even now.
Anything else to add for this round?
Even if he doesn't come out to grab them kicks.
I need to go back and recheck that out because I didn't think he came out to grab them cakes, but maybe he did and I just missed it. I was also in the process of eating while I was watching the show, too, so I may have been making my food while his music was playing, and I didn't recognize the salt.
Well, be it as it may. But we have reached the halfway point.
I know, we're only 45 minutes into the show.
Hey, we went through the first 5 matches, but then again, most of them aren't really worth a mention.
Well, to be fair, for most of those 5 matches there, we talked about them longer than they actually existed for. And with the exception of Sammartino Beefcake, no, Sean, I'm not going to let this go.
Whatever, man. Whatever.
Sean's resigning himself to the fact that I'm not going to get over this one. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get into our discussion here, Patrick? And since you are the traditional host of the show, I will let you moderate the discussion here.
Indeed. Obviously, as we know, as we approach the 32nd edition of WrestleMania, in 4 weeks, 4 weeks, obviously, WrestleMania now is an absolutely rousing success, bringing in people from legitimately around the world and, bringing in a lot of money to the cities that host it. But it almost makes us wonder, what happens if this fails? What happens if WrestleMania doesn't bring in audiences from across the country? Because the way this worked is you had the live crowd in Madison Square Garden, but the show was also shown in theaters across the country under closed-circuit television. And you had to obviously pay a ticket to get in. So the question is, what happens if those theaters don't fill up? What happens if you don't sell out Madison? Well, okay, technically they didn't sell out Madison Square Garden, but what happens if it fails? What happens if this doesn't work? Do you think WWF at the time ends up, going out of business, Harry?
Yes. And I think that we're getting ready to celebrate in December the 37th version of Starrcade. Okay, my math might be a little bit off on that one. I think the first Starrcade was actually like 82.
This would be December would mark the 34th, because the first one was 83.
Yeah. If this doesn't work, then I honestly feel like Vince ends up out of the wrestling and pay-per-view business here, because he stated himself, and we'll talk about this more when we do True Story of WrestleMania, that he put everything that he had into WrestleMania 1 in order to make it a success, and it was kind of make or break for him. He didn't really have any major sponsorships going into this show. All of his money and all of his efforts were tied into this show, rather than like the fact that you see nowadays. You get advertisements from people like Skittles and Truth, and I mean, obviously they have the network that they can sell and everything like that to bring in extra revenue here. There are no advertising partners mentioned during the course of this show here. This is all Vince going all in with his money. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, do you remember the story about Georgia Championship Wrestling?
Wait, one more time?
Do you remember the story about Vince buying the time slot of Georgia Championship Wrestling on Turner Television?
Black Saturday.
Yes. And apparently he used the money from the buyout from that time slot that he had gotten in order to pay for WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's kind of the old story with that with JTP. That's the case for WrestleMania.
Sean, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of hit it. I mean, he says it himself. And he's not just making it so that you really think this was some big deal, because it really was. I mean, you look back then, asking people to go to all these theaters, closed circuit, and watch this wrestling show, that's a big ask. And even though wrestling was kind of starting to get big into that rock and wrestling thing, and it was hitting a peak, it's not a guarantee people are going to go to these theaters. And if they don't, then you're looking at a WWF that doesn't exist at that point, or it's in the danger zone, certainly. I mean, even more than in the late 90s when WCW was pushing them. This would have been a big death knell at that point. And I don't think they're exaggerating when they say it either. Vince certainly knew this was one of those, go home or hit hard or go home kind of risks. And lucky for them and everybody else, it worked out,
If anything, if Vince does survive WrestleMania, I don't think you see the national expansion that we've seen the WWF become. I think we honestly see that the territory days are kind of still around, and you have these smaller niche promotions that are governing certain areas of the country, rather than an overall expansion that covers countrywide and everything for what the WWF and now the WWE would become. Do you agree or disagree with that, Patrick?
As far as if this fails, it ends up causing other ones to thrive.
Yes, you see, the WWF kind of abandoned their plans for nationwide expansion, and they end up going back into kind of their Northeast haven where they're known and that's where their marketplace is, rather than trying to go about the country. And you see kind of a boost in business for territories that would end up disappearing, like the AWA and like World Class Championship Wrestling or Mid-South Wrestling.
See, it's kind of tough because I think by this point the WWF was already on national TV with either Superstars of Wrestling or Championship Wrestling. So, everyone always kind of associates, WWF's expansion with AWA going out of business. But if this fails, who's to say that the AWA still wouldn't go out of business? Who's to say that it would only be, 3 years later that Ted Turner would end up buying JCP? I think it was either 88 or 89, somewhere around there. It's
late 88.
Okay, so 3 years, 3.5 years, roughly. Who's to say that Turner still isn't going to buy JCP because, the companies weren't doing bad. So, yeah, you could say if Vince failed, the WWF expansion would most likely fail. But it's hard to say how other companies would fare because sure, one of your main rivals, isn't going to be as big of a rival as they thought, but at the same time, you still have to handle your own business. So who's to say that AWA doesn't go out of business by 1992? Who's to say Ted Turner buys JCP and turns it into WCW in 1995? It's kind of one of those things. You can't associate the WWF with the other companies completely failing.
I just feel like that there would be a much greater chance of those other companies surviving this whole rush that Vince would end up putting on them had WrestleMania not been as successful as it was. And let's be honest here, the WWF was kind of the breaking point for a lot of these companies going under, including companies like the AWA and World Class, because they were swooping in and stealing talent left and right. Look at the AWA. They're losing the Rockers, losing Bobby Heenan, losing Hulk Hogan. Originally was arguably the biggest blow. For as much as we may dislike Hogan on this show, you can't deny the fact that losing Hogan was a huge blow to the AWA when Vince signed him and then figured out what to do with him, and that would not be Sterling Holding.
I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no denying that, But I'm not saying that things wouldn't be totally different. They absolutely could have been. AWA could. Well, okay, maybe AWA won't be in business by now, but WCW very well could be in business, or it could even be Jim Crockett Promotions. Now, here we are, over 30 years later. Things can change, but it's just. Well, yeah, you could say that they raided the talent roster. Boy, that sounds familiar, Eric Bischoff. But it's still tough to say how other companies were going to venture based on the WWF's failings.
Do you think the pay-per-view market ends up becoming what it eventually became had the WWF missed out on its opportunity here and WrestleMania had been classified as a disaster?
WrestleMania wasn't a pay-per-view, so that's tough to say.
Well, do you think companies would have been far less likely to take the opportunity to give wrestling an opportunity on pay-per-view had WrestleMania not been a success doing it through closed-circuit television then?
Oh, that's the biggest no-duh there ever is. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
WrestleMania bombs. It's a hard sell for, any of this stuff to... Granted, Starrcade had already been happening and whatever, but, it's... WrestleMania was that part that kind of let everybody go, oh, we can have wrestling on this thing. It doesn't matter who, and it's going to sell.
Yeah, I think Sean kind of hit on the head there. Is that this was easily the big launch point for this and would allow for the WWF to have the Wrestling Classic, which I think is considered the first WWF pay-per-view legitimately. But yeah, it would become a hell of a lot harder to sell. That's that part's obvious. Would the WWF ever venture to pay-per-view, as soon as they did? If this didn't work, it may take a few more years, who knows? But it would definitely become a hell of a lot harder to sell for them if WrestleMania doesn't do anywhere near the business that it did.
I would argue that the WWF wouldn't have made it back to pay-per-view if WrestleMania had flopped.
That's a very legitimate point you could have.
You're right.
Sorry.
I mean, it depends on. It really just depends on if whatever happens to them afterwards, okay, if they are able to overcome that and kind of sort of get back to what they wanted to do. Because let's be honest here, their biggest competitor, the AWA, you have to wonder if Vince doesn't take some of their guys, and I'm sure that either way, Eric Bischoff probably would have come and taken some of their guys since he worked for them and he had a very close view of the talent. So I think either way, the AWA would have gone down. Jim Crockett was basically killing themselves by trying to do too much, and that's why they were basically bought by by Ted. So you could argue that even though WCW would have probably been the leader, there would have been really nothing stopping Vince from being able to sort of get back to what he wanted to do. Just would have taken him a lot longer to get there.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, you almost have to consider it to be kind of a 2-year build, even with WrestleMania being successful. You know, I think everyone considers the pinnacle of the 80s wrestling boom to be obviously WrestleMania 3. You know, so if WrestleMania 1 doesn't work, we may not even get a WrestleMania 2, and you know, it would be very hard on Vince. And like we mentioned earlier, Vince put everything he had into this. So if this doesn't even sell, if this doesn't get 1.2 million people supposedly, you know, in the theaters across the country, I actually think that it probably would cause them to have to flat out go out of business.
And not to mention, I would make the argument here that WrestleMania 2 probably could have cost Vince as much as WrestleMania 1 not being successful would have, because look at how many steps backwards the company took after WrestleMania 2 due to the fact that they had that whole triple venue thing for it.
Oh, but they would have never done that. They would have never done that had WrestleMania 1 not been.
What I'm saying is, look at the steps backwards that they took because of WrestleMania 2 and their attempt to do it in 3 different cities and how badly that flopped.
Well, that's the point, though, because that's why they never did it again, was because it was so bad, but the only reason they could even do WrestleMania 2 was because of the fact that WrestleMania 1 succeeded. The only reason they even thought about doing the 3 markets was because of that.
Well, I think the reason WrestleMania 2 happened was because WrestleMania 1 was a success. The reason that they did 3 cities was because of the fact that at that time, JCP was doing Starrcade from 2. They were doing it from Atlanta and Charlotte. And they were doing exactly what WWF tried to do, but failed because they tried to stretch it too far. At least Atlanta and Charlotte, to my knowledge, I think Atlanta is still on the Eastern time zone. You know, but in this case, you're trying to stretch it across 4 different time zones, and that just made for its own issues. But if WrestleMania 1 doesn't work, the mere idea of doing WrestleMania 2 in one city doesn't even happen.
No, I don't disagree with that, but I'm saying that they decided to take the risk of WrestleMania 2 being in 3 different cities because of the fact that those are probably the 3 cities where WrestleMania 1 did the biggest business.
Probably.
Well, it's also the 3 biggest markets.
Yeah.
And they had a reason to do it. I mean, they had a theme for each one of them, so it was it made sense on paper. They didn't think about the fact that in the other arenas, you're having them sitting there watching a screen. You know, it just doesn't work.
I don't. But I think the long and short of it is, if this doesn't, I think kind of the way that we can sum this all up is, if WrestleMania 1 doesn't work, essentially wrestling is forever changed, and the World Wrestling Federation WWE now may not even be here. I think is kind of the best way to cap it.
If the WWF is still alive, at this point, it's nowhere near the national presence that it is because of WrestleMania being successful.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that it's still being alive at this point right now, if WrestleMania 1 was a flop, is a gigantic if.
Yep. And WCW probably would still be around.
Depends if Vince Russo got there.
I don't think they would have ever needed Vince Russo because the company would have
been doing such great numbers without him that his presence would have never felt like it was needed.
True.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I think creatively Russo can help a company if he has people over him in order to keep him from letting some of his more boneheaded decisions make television.
Yeah, fair enough. car crash, it only works in certain cases.
If anything, Russo could have been a driving force in order to help the WWF get to a point where, if it had survived WrestleMania 1 flopping, that it would have been able to once again be a national contender because of the fact that he did have some decent ideas in the WWF. It's just his extended execution for all of his other storylines wasn't necessarily the greatest.
Having a filter also helped.
That's what I'm saying. The fact that he had Vince McMahon telling him, yeah, there's no way that's going to make air. Whereas in WCW, it was whatever you want to do, Vince.
Pretty much, but I think we're getting away from it anyway. So, but yeah, either way, this would not be a good thing if this event ends up failing. Is the long and short of it. Shall we move into the second half here?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Alrighty. So, kicking off the second half, the World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions, the U.S. Express of Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham, accompanied to the ring by Captain Louis Albano, take on or defend the Tag Team Championship against Nikolai Volkoff and the Iron Sheik, accompanied to the ring by the Hollywood fashion plate, classy Freddie Blassie. And this is a weird match, and I'll tell you why. This match was a feature showcase for the U.S. Express, but they lost. Because it seemed like most of the match was just the U.S. Express, either taking the heat and kind of getting beat down, or, they were putting on a lot of flashy moves because Windham and Rotunda were relatively young still here in their careers, and it just seemed like a feature match for them, kind of like the Tito match, versus the Executioner earlier, except the whole thing goes awry when Rotunda gets, pushed into a corner by a referee, and Sheik comes up from behind and hits Barry Windham with a cane, and Volkoff ends up pinning Windham 1-2-3, so the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkoff become the new tag team champions. It's just one of the weirder ones for me, I think. But I think at this point also Windham and Rotunda were possibly considering leaving, which would probably be the reason for the tag title change, plus the things that would happen. You need kind of a negative viewpoint, considering the fact that the final three matches of the show, were all positive finishes. But it's just weird to me, I think.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me about this here is the fact that if I am not mistaken, I believe this is the only heel victory. Well, I mean, King Kong Bundy over SD Jones, but you got to consider that was a squash match. This is the only heel victory on the show, with King Kong Bundy squashing SD Jones, and then this particular match right here where Sheik and Volkoff take the tag titles. To your point about Windham and Rotunda, I don't know about Rotunda. I don't think his was immediate, but by the end of 1985, I'm almost certain Barry Windham is in the NWA.
Yes,
because the WWF would try to recreate the U.S. Express, but they would replace Barry Windham with Dan freaking Spivey.
And he showed no mercy, Waylon.
Well, quit your wailing about him.
I will have you know that gimmick should have been way more successful than it was if his back wasn't shot.
Probably, but we'll never know.
And with that, I'll quit wailing for mercy.
Oh boy.
Anyway, I mean, what are your thoughts about this match? I've kind of said my piece about it, but
truth be told, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts about this match. The only thing that really stands out to me is the fact that it was nice to be able to see them, arguably one of the most influential men in wrestling history, Freddie Blassie, get the opportunity to appear on the, at this point, biggest stage in wrestling history. I don't think Blassie gets enough credit for being as instrumental to wrestling as he was. And in addition to Blassie, in regards to him, as you mentioned, the Hollywood fashion plate, Freddie Blassie. In addition to that Lou Albano would play a big role in getting wrestling to the mainstream popularity that it would have because of his involvement with people like Cyndi Lauper and in situations like that as well.
Yeah, being on a cartoon show, all that. So.
And he was Super Mario.
Yes.
I actually own a couple of the movies where he's Mario on DVD somewhere around this apartment.
Because, of course.
Why not? I mean, that was a great part of childhood. I mean, at least they made that TV show work, unlike the Zelda terrible show that was. Anyway.
I just want to say Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling cartoon show was hot garbage as well.
That was cool for the time, though. Getting to see all the wrestlers on a cartoon show.
They could have at least voiced themselves.
I thought he did.
No, Brad Garrett voiced Hulk Hogan.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, never mind. Even though some of the other guys did voice themselves.
Well, you know something, dude. The Hulkster was a little bit too busy with the little Hulkamaniacs in order to do that, brother. And by other Hulkamaniacs, I of course mean Bubba the Love Sponge.
Oh boy.
The Hulka paychecks were a little too small for that one, brother.
Wow, played, sir.
I can't believe I just said that.
I can't believe he just popped me on air. You suck. Anyway, I can't stop laughing right now.
Move on to the next thing, Patrick.
Yeah, let's move on to the next match.
So the next match is a $15,000 versus a career body slam match. So
still a lot of Gorilla Monsoon here. That seems a little one-sided, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. So the rules for this match actually are simple. No pinfall, no count-out. The only way the match ends is if Andre the Giant slams Big John Studd. That's it.
Or if it goes to a time limit draw.
Yeah, that's basically how John Studd would win. So, I mean, what can you really say about having two giants in the ring? It's not exactly going to be a technical masterpiece. But, you know, for them to go 6 minutes, I mean, it wasn't really apparent yet, but you could kind of start to see that Andre, you know, was already by this point on the decline. So he didn't really do too much. It was mostly punches and kicks and chops until obviously the fateful body slam that Andre would get on Big John Studd and would thereby win the $15,000, which the crowd would get about $63 of it, and then Bobby the Brain Heenan would steal the damn duffel bag. Which, by the way, this would also be the only appearance on this show of Bobby the Brain Heenan, which is kind of a shame, because I'm trying to think. I think Jimmy Hart was the only manager who came out more than once, because he came out with Bundy and Valentine. I think every other manager only came out once.
Heenan's moments at WrestleMania would be to come still. This WrestleMania here was more about the involvement of the main event. In addition, Heenan got his big moment here because he's in, let's be honest, this is the second biggest match of the show. Regardless of the fact that they gave the semi-main spot to Wendy Richter and Leilani Kai, that was because of Cyndi Lauper's involvement. In terms of actual wrestling fans, you were looking forward to the main event, and then the other match on this card that had you interested was this one right here, Andre and Big John Studd.
Like the main event was easily the number one match. From an entertainment standpoint, you're looking forward to Richter and Kai for Cyndi Lauper's involvement. From a wrestling standpoint, you're looking forward to Studd and Andre. I think this might be the best way to put it.
from a wrestling standpoint, you were looking forward to Ricky Steamboat and Matt Bourne.
I'm talking the wrestling world, but not. I know what you mean, but no.
Honestly, I think you're more looking forward to Andre and Big John Studd due to the spectacle of it all, much the same way you were looking forward to the main event due to the spectacle of it all.
Yeah. But in the end, the Weasel is himself, and Bobby the Brain Heenan ends up stealing a bag, which, while both men were, 7 feet tall, but that bag with the money in it sure looked a hell of a lot bigger in Big John Studd's hands than it did Andre's. Andre looked like he could palm the damn thing.
To be fair, Andre probably could have palmed the damn thing.
He could also palm a ring.
Andre's hands were much bigger than Studd's.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at the fact here that, regardless of the fact that Andre was a couple inches taller than Studd, Andre was also significantly girthier than Studd was as well. At this point, Andre was probably up around the 500-pound mark, whereas Studd was announced, I believe, at around 380.
Yeah, Andre had about 100 pounds on him, which did make for a funny moment when Big John Studd tried to slam Andre, and that wasn't going to happen, brother.
Not without breaking his armpits and everything else, brother.
Yeah, I don't remember anybody ever slamming Andre. It never happened.
At this point, no. Brother. Anyway.
Well,
I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree the less said about this women's title match, the better. I will just say this much. Yet again, this is the match where young John Cena was watching and thinking, hey, there might be something to that move.
I just want to say Moolah is great here, but...
It's the only time I've ever liked Moolah. And I say that as somebody who absolutely despises her. I hate Moolah. But in this case, in a managerial role, I didn't mind it as much. But yeah, this match was boring as hell. And we're talking, before we get somewhat further into it, because we're not going to say much, Wendy Richter goes for the ladies' championship, not the women's championship, not the divas championship, the ladies' championship, with Cyndi Lauper in her corner, facing the champion Leilani Kai with the fabulous Moolah in her corner. In the end, Richter wins from a very, very, very botched finish, which features Leilani Kai go up to the top rope to try and hit a splash. And Richter is supposed to swing over with the momentum and get the pin. The problem is, it takes her 3 attempts to flip them over. And they're in a pin. They're lying, they're lying down. In reality, all Richter has to do is roll over. But for some weird reason, she can't. And it takes her like a legitimate 3 attempts just to get into the pin, and this is your finish.
Yeah, the thing about it...
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing about this match, too, is I think Vince saw the writing on the wall when it came to Wendy Richter's attitude as well, because if I'm not mistaken, it would be only a couple of months after this that the Spider Lady ended up happening. And they legitimately had Moolah shoot the title off of Wendy Richter.
There's a reason it's called the original Screwjob now. And it would be, I believe, the final match of Wendy Richter's career.
Good riddance.
I don't think she was that bad. At least in this case. I mean, she at least tried. But, yeah, you could see attitude problems, especially in her promos. But I really didn't think in the ring she was that bad, aside from that finish and the kind of inverted attitude adjustment, because, to put it frankly, she goes for the attitude adjustment, except instead of leading with the head, she leads with the legs.
You know what it kind of looked like to me? Do you remember Sean O'Hare?
Vaguely.
It looked like the Widowmaker without falling to the canvas.
Okay. Could have been a decent move, but I'm not telling you anything you don't already know.
Yeah, as far as this whole match goes, I know you disagree with me about King Kong Bundy and S.T. Jones. I think we can safely say this match is a dud.
Yes. The only reason this match exists was to get Sidney Lauper on the card. Richter and Kai don't matter. This is all about Lauper versus Moolah now. You know, and the people in the damn match are playing a secondary role. You know, and it's kind of just the only reason you don't remember this match for the match. You remember this for the celebration that Richter and Lauper have after. It's the only reason you remember this match.
Exactly.
So.
Did you guys mention that was Richter's final match of her career?
I think it could be wrong.
No, I'm about to say, because she wrestled a lot afterwards, and she was even in the AWA against Medusa and everything.
I was going to say, wasn't Randy Richter on the Super Clash pay-per-view?
Yeah, she was in a tag against Medusa and Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka, or Bad Company, against the Top Guns.
Yeah, against the redone Top Guns, because there were some issues with one of the members of the Top Guns getting fired and then replaced. And Vern expected nobody to notice the difference, despite the fact that the guy who got fired was white and the guy who replaced him was black.
Wow.
Vern was never really in touch with reality, honestly.
What else is new?
Like, don't get me wrong, I respect what Vern Gagne did for the business, but that man as a promoter was an abject failure.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any doubt.
Well, I mean, the company lasted for a while. It's not like, he was a total failure.
Because Vern Gagne because Nick Bockwinkel was carrying the company on his back for his father-in-law.
Oh, yeah, but still, I mean.
Okay, we've talked too long about Vern Gagne and how he screwed everyone over and blah, blah, blah.
I'm a big reader of Scott Keith's work, and Scott is actually going back and looking at the old wrestling observers from the time frame of the AWA Super Clash pay-per-view. So that's how I'm aware of all this going on and the stuff and the kind of terrible business practices that Gagne was up to. And if you have the opportunity, if you get a chance, and if this kind of historical wrestling knowledge is your forte, then I highly suggest you check out Scott Keith's blogofdoom.com in order to look into more about the observers from this time frame and find out more about the build towards. He's into 1989 right now, so we're going towards the build towards WrestleMania 5.
You could just pay the money and get the observer yourself. You don't need Scott Keith. Screw that.
No, not a fan of Scott Keith, Sean?
Nope.
Fair enough.
He originally caused the split between 4-1 and went on to take a bunch of the writers and form Inside Pulse. So
I'm aware of what he caused. I'm also saying that I still enjoy his work. That being said,
but you don't have the connection to 4-1 like I do. So
that's true. Despite the fact that I do appear on 411 both here and for my Wall reaction that I do every Monday night as well. I agree that I don't have the same kind of loyalty that a guy like you that specifically writes for the 411 website would have. That being said, though, I would like to see eventually it come back to the point where Scott's able to write for 411 again.
I don't think he wants to. I'm pretty sure he's fine where he's at. It's not like he's doing bad or anything.
Moving on, though. 411's going to love all the plugs tonight.
Well, you know what it is, Patrick? It's the fact that this show is so short. We're extending our conversations to cover other things in order to help pad out the episode.
Fair
Not
enough.
that it makes the show. Yeah. People would probably appreciate that the show is, not as long.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Maybe.
I did not hear a word Sean just said because Patrick was cutting him off. Try that again,
I'm
Sean.
just saying that he will probably appreciate that the show is not that long. So, hold on. I'm going to have to leave for a second. My kid is being ridiculous. I don't know why.
Well, the thing is we're not even an hour and a half in. We got a late start, so we're doing fine on time.
Okay. I'll be back.
Main event time, Ketsa. Let's do it.
Indeed it is. It is main event time. It's the one that has been built for month upon month. All right, I got to make sure I get this right. It is the World Wrestling Federation champion Hulk Hogan teaming with Mr. T with Jimmy
The incredible.
The incredible Hulk Hogan teaming with Mr. T with Superfly Jimmy Snuka in their corner, going up against Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper with Cowboy the Ace Bob Orton in their corner, with special guest referee Billy Martin, special guest outside referee Muhammad Ali, special guest timekeeper Liberace,
special guest ring announcer Billy Martin.
What did I say?
Referee.
Oops. Okay, sorry. Special guest ring announcer Billy Martin, special guest outside referee Muhammad Ali, special guest timekeeper Liberace, and not so special guest referee Pat Patterson, and special guest popcorn vendor somewhere.
I hear Olaf, the foreign exchange student, was actually the popcorn vendor, and if you get that reference, congratulations, you're like one of 4 people who will.
Yeah, sorry, I don't get that one.
When Jericho was making fun of Stephanie for sleeping with 3/4 of the locker room.
Oh, okay. So, Stephanie McMahon might have been a special guest popcorn vendor. She was in the crowd.
Shane McMahon would have been a special guest bathroom attendant.
I could make a joke, but I won't.
To pay off your joke from the Facebook preview that we typed out before this show.
Fair enough. So
not as good as Hulk a paycheck.
Fair enough. So yeah, this is the big money match. This is the match that Vince McMahon himself put everything on. He brought in the celebrities for it. He got he got his top star. He got one of the biggest stars in television. He's got his biggest heel, probably his second most over heel for, this one match. And like you said, this was a match for the spectacle of it, because it damn sure wasn't the match. But,
oh no, this was all about the active participants as well as the secondaries that were involved. This had nothing to do with the actual content between the ropes here, because let's be honest, given the 4 men involved, the only one really known as being an above-average worker is Piper. Orndorff was never considered to be anything special in the ring. Our disdain for Hogan in the ring is long established on this show. And Mr. T was a one-off inside of a wrestling ring as far as an active match participant. The only other time we'd see Mr. T involved in wrestling, to my knowledge, would be the boxing match against Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 2.
Which we know how that went. So.
Welcome back.
Yes. This was a spectacle. It's what it was. I mean, it was a good match. I don't think you could say it's bad. It's just it wasn't anything like overly special. It was all about getting all these people in the ring at once. The special guest commentator, the special referee, all that stuff. I mean, just as far as what it kind of encompasses WrestleMania all in one match, I think. Is the celebrities, the big-time stars. I mean, even though you can argue that WWE hasn't made a star in a long time, still, this one match, this one main event, is what Vince would want WrestleMania to go on to be the whole card to kind of signify going up and down. So, you know.
And I will say this much in a nice bit of trivia here. You know how we did WrestleMania 30 last week, Patrick?
Yeah.
At WrestleMania 30, during the course of a backstage segment, you would see Hogan, Mr. T, Piper, Orndorff, and Pat Patterson all backstage for a skit as well, where they bury the hatchet 30 years later.
And Mr. T talked about his mama some more.
I pity the fool who don't respect Mr. T's mama.
We're going to go through this again.
Mr. T. I stopped respecting Mr. T's mama after the 18th mention of her.
But that was only like 5 minutes into the speech.
Folks, if you have no idea what we're talking about, find last week's episode where we talk about Mr. T's Hall of Fame speech going into WrestleMania 30.
Or better yet, find the uncut version of Mr. T's actual Hall of Fame speech and sit back and revel.
Anyway.
No, there's really nothing to say about the in-ring content of this match. The finish was exactly what the finish needed to be in order to set up Paul Orndorff's babyface run. And as a matter of fact, the very next month at Madison Square Garden, because I just watched the Best of Madison Square Garden DVD set, me and you were talking about that. One of the matches on the Best of Madison Square Garden DVD set is from the following month at MSG, and it's Andre the Giant and Paul Orndorff against Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton Jr.
There you go. So obviously, but you could also see at the very end of this match here, you could also have a bit into the heel turn when Ordorff is left on his own and Mr. T's trying to reason with him, but Hogan's kind of like, no, let him go kind of thing. So you could kind of see the seeds being planted here. I mean, the match itself was essentially what you would expect. It was a brawl more than anything because Piper has never really been known as being a technical wrestler, and at this point, Hogan wasn't really anything special, and obviously, Mr. T kind of had more of a street fighting ideal going into this match. I do like how the match opens, though, with Piper riding Mr. T. Wow, that sounded weird. But going back to, freestyle wrestling, and Piper just immediately takes him down and just tries his best to keep him down and not really give him anything, which Piper obviously, has said in multiple interviews and multiple times that was essentially a legitimate thing. He didn't want to give Mr. T anything because you have a celebrity coming in.
No, and that's the thing that they don't get these days. That when you're bringing in the celebrities these days, they're specifically used in order to help get the celebrities over and what the celebrities are doing, while sacrificing those who are around the company 24/7 or those who are on the road 300 days a year. Piper basically outright stated, no, he's coming in to put me on the map, not vice versa.
Which Piper may be the only person to ever actually do that, if you really think about it.
Well, there have been other stories about guys going into business for themselves against celebrities. I mean, obviously, it's frowned upon due to the whole aspect of, well, that's going to make celebrities less and less likely to want to be involved with the product. But at the same time, you can kind of understand what Piper's thinking. Piper's thinking that I have a reputation to uphold here as being the baddest man in this industry right now. And in order to uphold that reputation, I can't let some guy come in off the street and make me look bad. I don't disagree with Piper at all.
No, that's the thing. I think most people actually don't disagree with him, in this case. Because, like you said, this is a guy coming in essentially from off the street, in more forms than one. And, you have a guy from a whole different world coming in, and it's like, okay, my team's going to have to put this guy over. Well, that's Ordorff's shop. I'm not doing it. That's essentially how Piper looked at it. That's going to be Orndorff's job to, help put everybody over because I'm damn sure not doing it. This guy, I'm not going to give this guy a damn thing. So, I don't blame Piper one bit, because at least in the end, everything would work out, and it would lead to their very interesting boxing match 1 year later at WrestleMania 2. But I don't for 1 second blame Piper for doing what he did in the beginning of this match.
Let me get your opinion on this one, Sean, here. Do you think Piper was right to go into business for himself there and not give Mr. T anything? Right. I would say that's, here's my thing though, and you bring up the Michaels and Tyson situation there. I would say that's a completely different thing though, because Michaels knew after that match with Austin was over that he was going away for a while, if not permanently. So Michaels would have no problem giving Tyson a rub there, whereas and just as importantly, Michaels wasn't going to have to still be on the road trying to sell shows and stuff while Tyson would go back to boxing or whatever, whereas as soon as Mr. T left after WrestleMania, it was still Piper going city to city to sell tickets for the WWF in his feud with Hogan and, by proxy after the end of this show, Orndorff.
Now, I do have one question real quick, and this is going based off of a story from, I believe it was Patterson himself, who said that, with him being the ref for the main event, that left Muhammad Ali on the outside, and on multiple occasions, when you have all of these elements, obviously everything's going to be kind of combustible, and it would blow up a couple of times. And supposedly Patterson said that when Ali gets into the ring and ends up taking the swing at Bob Orton Jr., that was actually like a legitimate thing, and that he was ready to fight off the world, essentially. Just, trying to essentially face off with the bad guys. But supposedly that was actually a legitimate swing. What do you think would actually happen if Ali connects? What happens if he ends up decking Bob Orton, or if he ends up decking Piper or Orndorff, at any point during the match?
If he ends up decking Orndorff during the match, Orndorff sells it because Orndorff's not in a position where he can't. If he ends up decking Piper during the match, I think we end up seeing a shoot fight end up breaking out live on pay-per-view.
Which would be awesome.
Because much like as we mentioned with Mr. T there, Piper wasn't there to put anybody over. Piper was there to keep his reputation as the most hated man in wrestling.
Oh crap, I just realized I think that whole thing that I said was on mute. So there's gonna be a part of where I'm supposed to be talking that's just gonna be nothing. That's great.
Nicely done. We're live.
We're gonna edit in some music for that afterwards.
No, we're not.
Instead of Sean talking, we'll just have Moonzack. Not actual music, Moonzack, so that way we can't get sued. What do you think, Patrick? Do you agree with me? Do you think if Ali takes a swing at Piper's stuff goes down for real? I almost said a different word there.
I think that other word, yeah, if Ali takes a swing, and not even if Ali takes a swing, if Ali connects, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, he's going to knock Piper out, because remember, this is still Muhammad Ali, or, yeah, you're going to see a legitimate fight with a brand new celebrity go down immediately.
I don't know.
And
I think at that point, you do something to Muhammad Ali, Piper might not have a job afterwards.
I disagree. And I disagree, and here's why I say I disagree, because I guarantee you that if Piper would have gotten into a shoot fight with Ali over Ali taking liberties, Vince would have A, backed up Piper completely because of the fact that Piper was standing up for his company, and B, Piper standing up for his company would have gotten him seen with more respect in the eyes of the wrestling fans.
We got to remember, the wrestling fans aren't going to see it that way. I mean, they don't know the backstage going-ons at this point, but I agree with you with Vince, but you have to look at it on the other side, too. You got to believe that Ali's camp would come after him, and I don't know. I mean, there might be enough pressure where Vince would have to make it, maybe suspend Piper or something. I don't know. That's one of those things that, thank God it didn't happen, and, we're just kind of talking about it, but I don't know. I just cannot imagine that nothing would happen to Piper, because Ali is not just some dude here.
And especially, like, the reason I'm kind of taking Harry's side on it, that it probably would have resulted in, like, a small suspension, but probably nothing major, is to Harry's point where he said that, Piper was kind of sticking up for the business that he's in, that he, bleeds and sweats and is in every day. Look at it once again 1 year later when he's in a boxing match with Mr. T. Everyone's supposed to be cheering Mr. T, but then again, Piper, who at this point was still, quite a hated guy, he was getting cheered. He was actually getting cheered by a lot of people at Nassau County Coliseum. So, because he was sticking up for the business. And so I think, if you have, and then again, though, you could say how much respect did Piper have for Ali? At this point, because, like we said, it's Muhammad Ali. It's one of the greatest boxers of all time. Sure, maybe he's, a little bit past his prime, but it's, he's still one of the greatest boxers of all time. So Piper, to his credit, may have actually taken pride a little bit in, taking a shot from Ali.
I will say this much.
Best boxers in the world.
I will say this much. I think he would be much more likely to sell for Ali than he would be for Mr. T, due to the fact that Ali had a legitimate athletic background.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he doesn't look as bad selling for Ali, who has that legitimate athletic background, as he would selling for Mr. T, who, let's be honest, is an actor and let's call it what it is, a fake tough guy.
I mean, that's why I was thinking at all that maybe Piper just doesn't do anything at that point, because he understands that, look, this is Muhammad Ali. He's kind of, maybe it's an honor at that point, and it's not that big a deal. But look, it's a good what if, I guess. But
yeah,
I don't have any problem with what he was doing in the boxing match. The boxing match is what it is. People will say, oh, but look, he shouldn't be just taking whatever from Mr. T. That's kind of dumb if you look at it that way. And you're right, Patrick. He was making himself get booed by just doing the shady stuff he was doing.
Yeah, but I'm not denying that part, especially the fact that, the punch that supposedly knocks him out of the ring in that boxing match, Mr. T whiffed. And when I was younger, I thought he hit it, and then I saw Piper's DVD where he says that he whiffs it pretty badly, and went back and watched it again, and yeah, he does. He whiffs it by a couple of inches.
Well,
but
Mr. T's not a boxer.
Yeah, so. But at least Piper, to his credit, knew that he was doing his proper job by selling it. So he's still defending the wrestling business, in Mr. T's crappy punches.
I agree. But I don't think that Mr. T should have gone over or anything either. That's stupid. So.
Well, that's why you have it end on a disqualification.
Right. So.
It was a perfect ending still.
Well, I thought Mr. T was not very happy about the whole ending or whatever. But
forget Mr. T. He's not the wrestler. It's still Vince's business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could give a crap. That's just Mr. T was happy about the way that they decided to end that match there, because I'm willing to bet T probably wanted Piper to put him over, and Piper politely told him what he could do and how he could go do it.
No, I'm...
So, getting back to this match, though, I mean, it was what it was, but it just... Once you get through all of the pre-match ceremonies, the spectacle of it's kind of gone, especially with the fact that Ali isn't in the ring for it. You know, but you know, the spectacle is just Pat Patterson. But this, you know, it's the spectacle is only like 5 minutes long of this whole thing.
I disagree. And the reason I say that is the spectacle during the course of this match is Mr. T himself, whether we like it or not. And the fact of the matter is that Mr. T was known because of the A-Team at this point there, and he was a bona fide nationwide star because of television being what it was, and with him being who he was in television.
I would disagree with you in that it was only because of Mr. T.
Let me finish. That being said, the real story for the course of this match was to sell the hatred between Hogan and Piper, and I think they did a fine enough job of that in and of itself. Because you got to remember, they were also trying to set up their house show market with this too, with the fact that Hogan and Piper were still going to be feuding at the house shows.
Right.
So you had the opportunity to have the crowd get the spectacle of Mr. T, but in addition, they also did enough for their own business, their own bottom dollar, by having Hogan and Piper get a national stage with which to square off before they started going from city to city facing each other, and then doing the disqualification finishes, whatever house shows they did, due to the fact that I think I remember reading this stat, that they were the only time that Hogan ever cleanly pinned Piper was at Judgment Day 2003, and he didn't pin him as Hulk Hogan. He pinned him as Mr. America.
Yep.
So technically, Hulk Hogan never pinned Roddy.
Yep.
And Piper does own a pair of victories over Hulk Hogan.
One of which was at a Starrcade?
And the other one of which was at a Halloween Havoc.
Well,
thank you,
WCW. Those don't even count, do they? That's just...
All I'm saying is Piper won, and that's all that matters to me.
True.
Brother.
Moving on.
I think actually, no, it's my turn to say this because I'm the host tonight, remember?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Sorry.
Well, reversal night here on Wrestling Unwrapped. All right, so with that being said, now that we've officially finished our let me try that over again. Now that we have you know what? I quit. Patrick, take back over.
Sorry. Jesus.
All right, let's start again. Now that we have officially finished our discussion of WrestleMania 1, it's time to get into the big finish here on Wrestling Unwrapped. And with that being said, with that we do our cash and our trash, which is our best and worst moment, respectively. Yeah, I know, Sean, shut up. Which is our best and our worst moment from the show. Basically, we describe it as cash is something that if there was a wrestling vault, you would store in there to keep. Trash is something that you feel the show would have been better off without. Our best and our worst match, which is self-explanatory, and then we give our show rating. Mr. Grummer, will you be joining us for all three of our closing segments?
Why not?
All right, well then you get to start here.
Well,
What
I
is?
mean,
So I'm about to ask you, slow your roll over there, jabroni. And now I owe the Rock royalties. Great. All right, anywho. Your trash for the evening. If you had a wrestling vote, what is the one thing from the show you would put in it?
I would put the. I think everything surrounding it is what I would put in it. I mean, just the spectacle of it all, the fact that the atmosphere, everything that is just, you get the sense of what Vince wants this show to be every year once you watch it and you go, okay, I get what he's doing here. And without this WrestleMania 1, you don't get that in the future WrestleManias.
Mr. Ketsa, your cash.
Yeah, it's kind of a spin on what Sean was saying, and it is kind of they've laid a hell of a groundwork here, but with big matches and big name celebrities, the very next year they would have Ozzy Osbourne and Ray Charles and Joan Rivers, so. The spectacle of everything and the fact that you could see the foundation laid of what WrestleMania would end up becoming. Now, here we are, 31 years later. So it's a great thing to see where it all began.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sean as far as my cash goes, and specifically the spectacle regarding the main event there, because that in and of itself is the telltale story of WrestleMania 1 as far as what Vince wanted the mainstream public to see professional wrestling as, and the spectacle that it could become. Having the names such as Billy Martin, such as Liberace, who was a huge deal at this point, the New York City Rockettes, who are still around to this day, Muhammad Ali, back when he was... While he may have been at the decline of his career, he was still a big name and arguably one of the biggest names in sports at that time frame. And then Mr. T's involvement in the match itself. Do not get me wrong. The match itself is not good by a wrestling standpoint. But the overall spectacle surrounding it is what makes it worthwhile. Mr. Garmer, your trash for the evening.
Trash. Ooh. There's probably plenty you can go on here with that. I'm gonna say, man. Okay, I'll go ahead and say that I can't say that the women's match is your trash because that means you wouldn't have Cyndi Lauper on the show, and that takes away from what the show was. So I think definitely you say that your trash would be the Special Delivery Jones and King Kong Bundy match. It's totally unnecessary, and to me, I get what they're trying to do, but it's just kind of silly.
I completely disagree with you. I'm going to go second here because I want to disagree with Sean with this one. Given the fact that King Kong Bundy is in the main event of WrestleMania 2, I think the squash match over SB Jones here is completely necessary. My trash is the setup. And what I mean by that, the fact that they had Lord Alfred Hayes standing over by the entranceway, and you would see various wrestlers passing each other at various times and not interacting and everything there. They needed to have Lord Alfred Hayes away from there in order to be able to give it a much more respectable presentation as far as his match introductions and everything, and the fact that he was leading you back to the interviews that me and Gene Okerlund had conducted. So I'm going to go with the setup for the entranceway, and specifically the fact that Lord Alfred Hayes was right there in the way of the wrestlers for the course of their entrances. Patrick, what's your trash?
Real quick before I mention what my actual trash is, I do also find it weird that you would have Gorilla Monsoon pitch to Lord Alfred Hayes, who would pitch to Gene Okerlund, which I found really weird the entire night. You had that the entire night.
It was probably more to do with getting Lord Alfred Hayes involved in the show.
Probably, fair enough. for me, Sean kind of knows, actually Sean knows where I was going with this. I'm going to give a special mention to the fact that the World Wrestling Federation title is not on the line, but I understand why it isn't. And obviously that would be something that they would remedy multiple times over now. And I think there's been a WWE/F title match every WrestleMania since. So they've remedied that part. For me, the actual trash for me is the fact of how they were conducting the promos. Because to me, it kind of, and I know where Sean's going to take this, because it kind of a time crunch kind of thing, but the show does only go like 2 hours, 20 minutes. It's the fact that there were blatantly multiple times where you would have Gene conduct one interview. Say we're doing Brutus Beefcake versus David Sammartino. Gene would conduct the interview with David Sammartino first, and then immediately just turn right, and Brutus Beefcake would be right there. It kind of like kills it, because it's like, hey, they're supposed to hate each other, but they're okay with being in the same room. That wouldn't kind of cause a fight or a stir or anything. It was like some of the interviews were separated by at least like a graphic or something, but the audio wasn't cut in any way, shape, or form, so it kind of just made it obvious that the graphic was unnecessary. And it's the one thing I don't like, because to me that kind of actually does kill kayfabe a little bit. But it's just, if they even just had a graphic or something, or, cut audio a little bit just to make it seem like they're separate, I wouldn't have minded it so much. I didn't like how all of the backstage interviews were conducted.
You mentioned that Sean might want to comment on that. Sean, I'll give you.
Well, I mean, I think part of it is we have to remember that this is 1985, and the editing, is not what it is today, or even what it would be in, later years. So to make it much easier on themselves, the technical equipment that Vince has at this point isn't, great either. For one, I thought that they did still have kayfabe as far as the locker room goes at this point. The heels would dress in the heel locker room, the faces would dress in the face locker room. I think it was one of those where most people are not going to think about that, so they didn't think about it. And it probably would have been much harder for them to constantly have something that interrupts to go from one promo to the next. It's also where I think later on, as the WrestleManias go on, they realize that they don't need to have a promo for every single match. But, I think this was also a time filler as well. So, that's the worst place you can go there.
Yeah, I agree with you as far as the time filler thing, because you take out a lot of those interviews there, and you're probably looking at maybe an overall time frame of about 2 hours even. So it wouldn't surprise me if those interviews were...
Whoa. You okay?
You there, Fury?
Oh, his phone might have...
Oh, yeah, 2 hours. I mean, like you said, it's not really a major thing, but it's just something that I didn't like to see. It makes it look a little unprofessional to me. And it didn't, but I mean, it's kind of still a small change kind of thing.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, and it does make sense from that standpoint. I just think that you're looking at a different situation. They didn't have the wherewithal to have little video things for each of the for some of these feuds that they could have done, anything like that, that we would probably see today or later on as the WrestleManias went on, where you could kind of interrupt the promos with that. It's just, he was probably just thinking of, okay, we need to do this in 2 hours or so. What can we do to fill some of the time of these promos? And he probably figured, okay, we have them far enough apart that nobody's going to see the fact that Gene is just turning. But
Except for the one where he blatantly just turned.
yes, I don't.
Harry back?
You there, Harry? Okay. Oh, great. Apparently, I lost both of them. Oh boy, this is awesome stuff going on right here. Yeah, both. I lost both of you. Oh, this is awesome for live stuff happening here. Okay, what is? Hold on. Now Skype is not responding, which is great. Okay. Okay, are you there? Oh, wonderful. One of you guys there? Okay. I think we pretty much, looks like we might have lost this entire thing here. Let me see if I can get one of them. Apparently Skype is just wanting to be an asshole right now. So, I really don't, I don't know what I can do here other than say that, I'm going to try to keep getting them on here as I just had to reset Skype because it was not letting me, it was not letting me actually put them on the call at all. So now I have to hope that Skype will turn back on, or we're just going to have to end the show. Because I have no other way of getting them on this. Oh boy, this is not good. It's not even signing me on now. That's awesome. Yeah, this might be one of those where I have to. Oh wow. This is great stuff happening here live on this show. Let me see if it lets me sign in, which would be another thing that it may not let me do. Okay, well, in case this has to be the end, which hopefully not. Yeah, okay, let me sign in. I don't know what happened here. Let me see if maybe it'll let them call again. Anyway, just want to say, here we go. Let me see if, I think I finally have Harry. Jesus. This is a pain.
Am I here?
Yes. Skype decided to wig out and would not let it wouldn't let you enter the call, then it cut Patrick off, and then it wouldn't let me either get either one of you.
All right, so are we still on the air?
Yes, but I've had to been like stalling for 2 minutes.
All right, well, we'll just edit that out in post.
I'm not redoing this show.
All right, well, then, sorry, folks, you're going to have to fast forward. Is Patrick back?
Not yet, but, I mean, we were kind of just going on with the same thing, so I don't know if you want to just... Hold on, let me see if I can...
What was the last thing you heard? What was the last thing you heard me say?
You cut off in the middle of whatever you were explaining for that thing about the promos and whatever.
It's all going terribly wrong.
We're having WrestleMania 2 level issues of technical difficulties today.
Or beware of dog.
It's almost like we're in 3 different cities ourselves. Oh, wait a minute.
At least 2 of you are in the same time zone, though.
All right, so anywho, you guys kind of expanded upon my point about the promos extending the time of the show.
Yeah.
All right, so that will be cash and trash for the show. Let's go ahead and get into our best and worst match. And for me and Sean, I think we both agreed that earlier in the show, and I don't know if Sean's going to stand by this, but I definitely stand by mine. To me, the best match on the show was Ricky Steamboat and Matt Bourne. And the reason I say that is because Matt Bourne was the perfect foil for Ricky Steamboat in order to get Steamboat angry enough that he eventually broke out his martial arts stylings and then eventually led to Steamboat putting him away with the top rope crossbody. The match was horrendously short, and we'll talk more about that in my worst match, because I think you guys know where I'm about to go with that as well. But with the match being as short as it was, these guys still put on an excellent sprint, and I don't think they ever really slowed down the pace of this contest at all. Sean, do you still agree that Matt Bourne and Ricky Steamboat was the best match on the show?
Oh yeah, totally. I agree.
That makes three of us. I wholeheartedly agree, and like you said, it was fast-paced and nonstop for the less than 5 freaking minutes that they had, and this was easily the best showcase match out of anything on this card.
And you can still see them laying the groundwork for future usage for a couple of these people as well. Like we talked about King Kong Bundy with S.D. Jones. You can also see that they had big things planned for Ricky Steamboat as well, and probably would have been even bigger had he not decided to focus on his family.
Which is still amazing that he did that he put his family first.
All the stories you hear about wrestlers choosing the business over their family, and we talked about the Hall of Fame speech of one Jake the Snake Roberts. Ricky Steamboat was the exact opposite, which just goes back to that whole real-life good guy reputation that Steamboat always had. Steamboat was a family man first, and especially once Bonnie had Ricky.
Yep. So,
all right, Sean.
Yeah, all three of us are in agreement for that.
All right, Sean, I will let you go first here. What is your worst match for WrestleMania 1?
I don't think you can count S.C. Jones and King Kong Bundy because it was just a squash. I don't know. This is one of those things where you can easily go with, the Executioner and Tito Santana. You could easily go with that the match I just mentioned. But I think as the match that was actually trying to be a match, I think you have to put the ladies' title match in there.
Patrick?
I think Harry and I are going to be in agreement here. Without a doubt, David Sammartino and Brutus Beefcake for me, and I'm guessing Harry too.
You would be guessing correctly.
Yeah, this match is painful, in the fact that of all of the matches that you could have given over 10 minutes to, and you make it this one, you could have probably trimmed this down to 6 minutes and given the other almost 6 minutes and share the wealth a little bit. Give Steamboat and Bourne a few extra minutes. Give them like 5 more or so. Or throw an extra minute on to your title matches, or so. Because, like you said, after this and the main event, the next longest match I have is the tag title match at 6:56. So think about that. You have 9 matches, only 2 go over 10 minutes, and those same 2 are the only ones that even go over 8 minutes. So, the fact that it was just a way to get Bruno into the show, and they're trying to get his son over, and maybe they don't have the plans that you would think that they would have, but this match was just painful to watch. This was so annoying. And it actually just kind of resonates my feelings towards it with the fact that it ends in a friggin' double DQ, and you don't get any satisfaction out of this. You get nothing from it. So, easily the worst match for me.
There isn't really a whole lot I can say here to expand upon what Patrick just said. My thing about it is, look, I understand that you want to give the time to Bruno and to David by proxy for Bruno, to thank Bruno for everything that he had done for the WWF to get them to the point that they were able to provide this show, WrestleMania, through closed-circuit television. That being said, I think if you trim about 4 minutes off of this match and let them go about 7 minutes, it's a better match for it. You can still tell the same story without all of the stalling that occurs in this match, and you can give 2 of those minutes each to the IC title match as well as Steamboat and Bourne, and allow both of those matches to develop as well. And with the fact of Valentine being as hated as he was, Steamboat being as loved as he was, Junkyard Dog being as loved as he was, the crowd reactions for those matches definitely proved that the fans in attendance would have been more emotionally invested in those matches getting the extra time rather than this particular match getting the extra time that it got. So that brings us to our biggest of the big finishes here, and that is our overall show rating. I'm not going to lie, I'm really curious to see how this is going to work out for myself and Patrick, because it is rare that we're more than a point apart, and it could happen here tonight. Sean, we start with you. Scale of 1 to 10, WrestleMania 1.
Oof. I'm giving this a 5. And if it wasn't because the spectacle certainly delivers, the match quality on this show is pretty bad. Other than the spectacle and the 5 minutes that is Bourne and Steamboat, and then the main event, because you kind of just have to watch the main event, the rest of the stuff is just, you could really just skip it. I mean, it's absolutely unnecessary. A lot of it comes off like just, you could be watching an episode of Raw from whenever. I mean, just, or an episode of Superstars if we want to be, quaint for the time. Just, a lot of it didn't feel like this should be at WrestleMania, if you look at it from what WrestleMania becomes later on. So, yeah, I mean, this is purely the spectacle WrestleMania. This is purely when you get a number 1. When people say, I watched the first movie of something and it feels like it's building, and then number 2 is better, even though number 2 was not better. You had to wait till number 3 for it to get to, I think, the pinnacle of what you want WrestleMania to be. This felt like a building block instead of this is your WrestleMania.
Yeah, you really wouldn't get that pinnacle feel for WrestleMania until 3 and then 5 and 6, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick?
Sean, I'm so glad to hear you. Go ahead.
I'm really curious to hear what your number is going to be. Lay it on us.
What do you think?
Well, I know what mine is. I'm just curious as to if we're going to be close or not.
All right. I'm actually in the exact same boat as Sean. I'm giving this a 5. And like we said, even if you take out the spectacle of the main event, this could very easily be like a 3 or a 4. So you're giving it a point because, that main event, that's the money maker there. That's the big one. That's what's drawing the fans in. And that served its purpose. That did its job. Be that as it may, the rest of the matches here, nothing really, stands out. And it's kind of an overall meh show. The Body Slam Challenge, that's not really that much different than any Mid-South stipulation kind of match, $15,000 Battle Royal, kind of a thing. So there's not much difference there. This also doesn't help that most matches are just painfully short, and the one match that's long is painfully long, as we've mentioned multiple times tonight. So it's just, I stand by what I said. If you take out the main event, to me, this is a glorified house show. This really is no different than any other major show to me. So I cannot go very high. So I'm actually going with a 5.
I hate to say it, but our 1-point streak remains intact, Patrick.
Oh, darn.
I gave the show a 6. And the reason I give this show a 6 is because, yes, the main event is a spectacle in and of itself, so that's obviously worth a couple points. Cyndi Lauper's involvement with regards to the women's title match is worth another additional point. The challenge and the just general overness of the Junkyard Dog in the Intercontinental Title division is worth a point in of itself. To me, you have the spectacle of the first ever title change at a WrestleMania being the tag titles as well. And then I completely disagree with you. I think Andre the Giant and Big John Studd is a completely WrestleMania worthy match. And the reason I say that is because I do believe that this was the first time that those two had ever crossed paths against each other in an official match. And that was something that people wanted to see if Andre would be able to save his career and what Andre would do with the money. Because as Andre talked about in the interview, it wasn't about the money to him. It was about proving a point to Big John Studd that he was the giant around here. And to Big John Studd and Bobby Heenan, it was all about finding a way to get rid of Andre the Giant from the World Wrestling Federation. So I think that match in and of itself is an excellent spectacle. You have King Kong Bundy setting a WrestleMania record, even if they fabricate the bejesus out of it. And you have a very strong babyface presence in the early part of the show, with the exception of the King Kong Bundy match that I think would get the crowd riled up into a frenzy going towards your main event. So all the booking decisions, if you think about them, make sense, with the exception of David and Brutus getting as much time as they did. So I give the show a 6.
One of these days, you and I are going to separate by more than a point.
I don't think it's going to be next week.
God, no. Do you want to handle this one, or do you want me to?
Oh, I got this, man.
Okay.
It is April 2nd, I believe. Or nope, April 3rd. Oh, it's April 1st. No kidding. Yep, April Fool's Day. It will be April 1st, 2001 when we come back to you next here on the Way Back Machine. Points to anybody who gets that reference. As Wrestling Unwrapped goes back to the end of an era, quite literally speaking, as the deaths of WCW and ECW take us to what is widely considered to be the greatest pay-per-view of all time. Do we agree? Do we disagree? No, we agree. We'll tell you how much we agree. When you check out Wrestling Unwrapped presents WrestleMania 17 next Sunday.
Hey, say it right.
X7. Happy?
Yes.
Okay. Next Sunday night here on the W2M network. Anything else to add for tonight, guys? No?
Well, we'd like to thank once again Wrestlemania.com and LastRunnerSports.com for us being in partnership with them. And, of course, you can check out all of the other podcasts on the W2M network. We just did a new Rest of the Max episode, which we found out during the episode that Hayabusa passed away, so we talked a little bit about his impact on wrestling and how much of an innovator he was, and as long with all the other stuff. Do what?
I just said rest in peace, Hayabusa.
Yes. And we had another football show, too.
I was a big, speaking of the football show, you can actually catch me on an episode of Football to the Max. I believe the very first titled such.
The second one, we did 2 that night, but yeah.
As I talk about my Buffalo Bills.
Yes. Harry was the first person ever to us have a pre-record and then also have a live person talking about the team, too. So that's pretty cool.
In addition, you can hear more from myself by checking out the Raw Reaction Monday nights at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Breaking Wrestling News Radio. Myself, 411 Mania's Raw reporter Tony Acero, and the man behind the Cajun Corner, or as we've officially dubbed him now, the third man, NWO reference, Rick Balin, bring you the Raw reaction every Monday night at 11:30, immediately
what
following
side is he
Raw.
on? That's what we all want to know.
Thanks, Bobby. Well played. In addition, we'll have a very special episode of The Reaction coming at you in 3 weeks. Usually we break down the show in its entirety. The Monday night before WrestleMania, we are going to completely ignore that episode of Raw. It is a 1.5 hour preview for WrestleMania 32.
Cool.
Excuse me, WrestleMania Star. No, WrestleMania 32, Vince. Get over yourself.
Just WrestleMania, damn it.
And then... What?
Don't forget to plug our stuff.
I'm not, don't worry. And then immediately after WrestleMania, or at some point when the guys get back to the hotel while they're in Dallas, you will be able to hear a live recap from them and a pay-per-view version recap from myself because I'm poor. I can't afford such trips.
Well, to be
WrestleMania
fair,
32.
two of them already live in Dallas.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there's no guarantee that those two are going to make the show. We know what happened last time.
Oh, well, come on now. That's just mean.
But I'm not wrong.
They did make the Raw that came later, so...
Yes, and I wish Paul and Gary nothing but the best there, but gentlemen, drive carefully.
That's mean.
They'll find humor in that, whether you do or not. We're a morbid bunch here on the W2M network, Sean. You just have to accept that.
I know.
Yeah, we do.
Namely Harry, but, you know.
Well, you know, it is what it is. April 3rd, 2016, myself, Patrick Ketza, Sean Garmer, Gary Vaughn, and Paul Weezer will bring you Wrestling Unwrapped to the Max, the breakdown of WrestleMania. Why don't you two call into the reaction that week and give your predictions as well?
I'll see what I can do. We would still be
I'm
doing
available.
a football show, but
You can call in. You can call it early before the football show goes live. We'll make sure we get you on early, Sean.
okay.
And then, I mean, obviously, I don't want to step on your W2M toes, but I'm guessing you guys you'll probably be leaving soon, and there might not be an episode of W2M that week.
No, we would have
Or
one.
three.
I'm leaving that Tuesday morning, and I'll be at. We'll probably do perhaps even a video version of W2M that week because all three of us will be together in the same room at Gary's house. Because if you didn't know, Paul and Gary live like 5 minutes away from each other. So
That's mean.
And they got a serious bromance going on. It's cool.
Anyway. Finish up, Harry, so we can go home.
I think that's it here. We're right around the 2 hour and 20 minute mark, which is what we planned. So, for our producer, Sean Garmer, your usual host, and he who will be back in that role next week, assuming I'm filling up the snuff, Patrick Ketza. My name is Harry Broadhurst. We thank you for listening to Wrestling Unwrapped, WrestleMania 1, and we look forward to joining you next Sunday for WrestleMania X7 as our road to WrestleMania continues. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
later.
Later.